I still remember the day when everything began. Emily was always a bright and cheerful girl, full of life. She was my cousin, and we grew up together in a small town, surrounded by love and faith. Her family was devoutly Catholic, and so was she. But something dark, something unfathomable, began to creep into her life when she left for university. At first, it was subtle. A lingering sadness in her eyes, complaints of sleepless nights. No one thought much of it. Stress, we assumed. But none of us knew that we were standing on the edge of a nightmare. The beginning started with strange dreams. Emily would call home in the middle of the night, her voice shaking, telling us about horrific visions. She spoke of being trapped, unable to move, while dark, shadowy figures loomed over her bed. She would feel suffocated, her body paralyzed, but her mind fully awake. These experiences became more frequent, and soon, she claimed that it wasn't just dreams anymore. She began hearing voices, whispers in the dark that told her things no one should ever hear, things she refused to repeat. When she returned home on breaks, we could see the toll it had taken on her. She was gaunt, her face pale and sunken. She avoided eye contact and often appeared to be in a daze. Her hands would tremble, and at times, she would mutter to herself, as though speaking to someone we couldn't see. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said it was likely depression or maybe psychosis. But Emily, she knew it was something else, something much darker. The manifestation. Things escalated quickly. One night, during dinner, Emily suddenly froze. Her eyes went wide, and her breathing became shallow. We asked if she was okay, but she didn't respond. Instead, she began speaking in a language none of us recognized, an ancient, guttural dialect that sent chills down my spine. Her voice was deep, inhuman. Then, as suddenly as it began, she collapsed to the floor, convulsing violently. I'll never forget the way her body twisted, as though some invisible force was wrenching her limbs into unnatural angles. The room filled with a suffocating cold, and an eerie silence followed, broken only by her gasps for breath. When she regained consciousness, she didn't remember a thing. The episodes became more frequent after that. Emily would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming, her body drenched in sweat. She started speaking in multiple languages, German, Latin, even Aramaic. Her voice would change, fluctuating from deep and booming to high-pitched and shrill. It was as though different entities were speaking through her. She became violent, lashing out at those who tried to help her, even attacking her own parents in a fit of rage. That's when Father Moore was called in. The exorcism begins. Father Moore was a kind, soft-spoken priest who had known our family for years. When he arrived, he immediately recognized that what was happening to Emily was beyond the realm of medicine. He believed, without a doubt, that she was possessed by demonic forces. After consulting with the church, it was decided that an exorcism was necessary. The ritual began on a cold, stormy night. I was there, along with Emily's parents and a few close family members. Father Moore came prepared, his Bible clutched tightly in one hand, holy water in the other. Emily had been restrained to the bed, her once gentle face now contorted with anger and malice. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, were now dark, hollow voids that stared straight through us. As Father Moore began the exorcism, reading from the ancient rites, Emily's body thrashed violently against the restraints. Her screams were deafening, primal. It didn't sound like her. It didn't sound human. Leave her. In the name of Christ, I command you to leave her, Father Moore shouted, his voice steady but strained. Emily responded with a deep, guttural laugh that echoed throughout the room. She is ours. She belongs to us, she hissed, her voice not her own. We watched in horror as her body lifted off the bed, her back arched in an impossible position. The room grew unbearably cold, and we could see our breath in the air. Objects around the room began to shake. The walls creaked as if the house itself was under attack. Father Moore continued, unfazed by the chaos around him. He sprinkled holy water on Emily, and her skin sizzled as though burned by fire. She screamed again, this time in agony. The battle within. For days, the exorcism continued. Emily would alternate between violent outbursts and moments of calm, during which she would beg for help, pleading with us to free her from the torment. "I don't want to die," she would cry, her voice full of despair. "Help me, please." But just as quickly as she returned to herself, the demons would take hold again, mocking us, taunting us with their power. There were times when it seemed like Emily was gone, like the thing inside her had fully taken over. She spoke of visions, horrifying, hellish landscapes where she was tormented endlessly by shadowy figures. She said they whispered to her, telling her that she was worthless, that she deserved this fate. Father Moore continued the battle, calling upon the saints, invoking the name of Christ over and over again. But it was clear that this wasn't a single demon inside Emily. No, there were many. During one particularly harrowing session, Emily revealed their names. "We are Legion," she screamed, her voice splitting into multiple tones, each one darker and more sinister than the last. The final day. By the end, Emily's body was broken. She was gaunt, her skin pale and her bones protruding as though she hadn't eaten in weeks. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles forming beneath them. It was clear that she was nearing the end of her strength. Father Moore, too, was exhausted, but he refused to give up. He believed that Emily's soul could still be saved. On the final day of the exorcism, something changed. Emily, for the first time in days, seemed calm. She looked at us, really looked at us, and smiled weakly. "They're almost gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Father Moore continued the ritual, his voice growing stronger with each word. The room was filled with a sense of peace, as though the darkness that had hung over us was finally lifting. But then, without warning, Emily's body convulsed violently one last time. Her eyes rolled back, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. The lights flickered, and the air grew thick with tension. We all froze, watching helplessly as the final battle for her soul unfolded before us. And then, it was over. Emily lay still, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. She was free.